Okay, so I know others felt this way, but when I was watching season 2 and 3 of Squid Game, I kept getting this weird sense of deja vu. Not in a bad way, not in a they're recycling the same story kind of way. It was more subtle than that. There were just certain moments, certain character interactions, where I caught myself thinking, wait, why does this dynamic feel so familiar? And at first, I brushed it off. I figured maybe it's just because we already understood how the games work now. Of course, things are going to feel similar. Same games, same rules, same type of pressure. But the more I thought about it, the more it started to feel intentional. It's like the writers didn't just create new characters for season 2 and 3, they created reflections. Not exact copies, not replacements, but characters that almost invite you to compare them to someone from season 1. And I don't even think there's some massive hidden message behind it. I'm not saying this is some deep commentary about fate or cycles or whatever. I genuinely just think the writers knew exactly what they were doing. They understand what made season 1's characters so memorable, and instead of trying to outdo them completely, they give us new versions that hit similar emotional beats, just in different ways. And what makes it interesting is that depending on who you liked in season 1, your opinion on season 2 characters probably shifted because of those comparisons. If you loved someone in season 1, you might have been way harsher on the season 2 counterpart, or maybe you felt like the newer version handled things better, or worse. Either way, I think the parallels are there on purpose, and I think it's actually really fun to break them down and just look at how these characters stack up against each other. So that's what we're going to be doing in today's video. I'm going to compare some of the strongest character parallels between Season 1 and Seasons 2 and 3, not to say one season is better, not to say one character clears the other, but just to see how differently similar roles can play out once you change the circumstances. And trust me, some of these comparisons are way more layered than they seem at first. Let's start with a comparison that, in my opinion, feels the most deliberate, Song-woo and Myung-gi. I think the writers knew exactly what they were doing here. From the very beginning of each season, there's a subtle framing choice that already links them. Before the first game even begins, we're shown their names, their debts, their humiliation. They're among the first players properly introduced, and we see them get slapped by their recruiter. It's not random, it's almost like the show is signaling, this one matters. In Season 1, Cho Sang-woo is presented as the pride of his neighborhood, the educated one, the guy who's supposed to make it out. His fall hits harder because he had status, intelligence, and opportunity, and still ended up drowning in debt. Season 2 and 3 approach Myung-gi in a very similar way. He's not portrayed as reckless or clueless. He understands numbers. He understands risk. He carries himself like someone who's used to thinking ahead. Just like Song-woo, his presence in the games isn't framed as stupidity. It's framed as someone intelligent whose decisions spiraled out of control. And that context matters because when red light green light ends and the vote happens, their choices feel consistent. After witnessing absolute chaos, they still vote to continue. That decision tells you everything about their mindset. It's not about bloodlust, it's not about thrill, it's about logic. Outside the games, their lives are already in ruins. Their reputations are gone. Their futures are compromised. In their minds, the games aren't a step down, they're the only remaining opportunity to fix what's already broken. That strategic thinking follows them into every game. They don't move impulsively, they observe, they calculate, they wait for patterns. There's always a sense that they're running probabilities in their heads while everyone else is reacting emotionally. It's why they're rarely the loudest in the room, but often the most dangerous. The fourth game in each season is where the calculation becomes brutal. In both cases, they're directly responsible for the death of one of the most loved characters in their respective seasons. Song-woo kills Ali, and Myung-gi kills Yeonju. And it's not done out of panic, it's done out of survival logic. That moment is where the audience fully understands the cost of being the smart one. Intelligence in the Squid Game world doesn't protect your morality. If anything, it makes it easier to justify sacrificing it. By the time the fifth game rolls around, you see another subtle echo. Neither of them rushes ahead recklessly. They position themselves behind hesitant players. That placement isn't accidental, it reflects how they approach risk. Let someone else test the danger first. Gather information. Move when the odds shift in your favor. It's strategic patience, not cowardice. And when the final game arrives, their mindset hasn't changed, but their emotional state has. They're still thinking, still calculating, still trying to outmaneuver Gi-hoon, but something inside them is fractured. By the time Song-woo faces Gi-hoon, the weight of everything he's done is sitting on him. The confidence is there, but it's cracked. With Myung-gi, you see a similar unraveling. The composure that defined him earlier in the season starts to erode. What's left isn't just strategy, it's desperation layered on top of it. That's what really ties them together. They enter the games as intelligent men who had already lost everything outside of them. Inside the arena, survival becomes the only measurable success left. And once that's the goal, morality becomes negotiable. Neither of them relied on strength. Neither of them relied on luck alone. They weaponized their minds. They adapted. They made the hard calls that other players couldn't. And by the end, both are standing opposite Gi-hoon as distorted versions of who they were introduced as. Not villains, not mindless killers. Strategists who understood the rules and followed them to their logical, devastating conclusion. That's why this parallel works so well. It doesn't feel like a repeat. It feels like the show revisiting a specific type of person asking, what happens when intelligence is paired with desperation? And in both seasons, the answer is the same. You survive longer than most, but you don't walk away whole. Now let's shift gears. Because if Songwoo and Myunggi represent intelligence under pressure, Deoksu and Namgyu represent something completely different. Raw power. From the moment Jang Deok-soo steps into Season 1, he feels like a classic villain. Loud, arrogant, and violent. The kind of guy who walks into a room and immediately takes up space. He doesn't hide what he is. He doesn't pretend to be moral. He thrives on intimidation. Namgyu carries a similar presence in Season 2 and 3, but is less theatrical and more volatile. Where Deoksu feels like a mob boss dropped into a death game, Namgyu feels like pure aggression barely contained. There's less charm, less manipulation, more impulse. But underneath those stylistic differences, they serve the exact same purpose. They're the players who look the strongest, physically dominant, intimidating, feared. Early on, it almost feels like they're untouchable. Other contestants gravitate toward them, not because they're respected, but because aligning with power feels safer than opposing it. And in a game built on fear, that kind of presence goes a long way. But here's what makes this parallel so important. The show uses both of them to prove that physical dominance means nothing in a system controlled by invisible elites. They kill. A lot. They throw their weight around. They build reputations inside the games. For a while, it works. People hesitate around them. People follow them. And yet, they're still just pieces on a board. That's the irony. No matter how powerful they look compared to the other players, they're still completely powerless compared to the people running the games. The masked guards, the frontman, and the VIPs. The corrupt rich who sit above it all. Deoksu and Namgyu might dominate other contestants, but they don't control anything. And the show makes sure we see that. What I also find interesting is that despite how brutal they are, neither of them is fearless. There are moments, subtle ones, where the nervousness shows, the hesitation, the realization that they can die just like everyone else. For all the aggression, all the yelling, all the posturing, they're still human, still scared, still aware that one wrong move ends everything. That vulnerability doesn't excuse what they do, but it makes them more than just one-dimensional villains. Another small but intentional parallel is how they treat the female leads of their respective seasons. Deoksu constantly undermines and dismisses Saebyok, acting like she doesn't belong in the same conversation as him. It's arrogance mixed with insecurity. He sees strength in her, even if he won't admit it. Namgi does something similar with Jonhee, mocking her openly, even in front of Myunggi. It's the same pattern of belittling what he perceives as weakness, as if tearing someone down reinforces his own dominance. But maybe the strongest parallel between them isn't how they act towards others, it's how they build their power. Neither survives alone. They form groups, they gather followers, they create many hierarchies inside the larger system, and on the surface, it makes sense. Strength in numbers, protection, control. But if you really think about it, those groups aren't just about survival, they're about ego. Having people around them makes them feel invincible. It reinforces the illusion that they're in control, and that illusion shatters in almost identical ways. In Season 1, Deoksu's downfall comes from within his own circle. Player 212, Hanmi No, the very person he dismissed and used, becomes the reason that he falls. Literally, his own dynamic, his own arrogance, leads to his death. Namgyu's ending mirrors the same betrayal from within energy. Minsu, someone tied to his group, ends up being the reason he dies. It's not some grand heroic takedown from an outsider, it's internal collapse. And just like that, the men who seemed untouchable are gone. Both die in the fifth game, both fall to their deaths. And the symbolism there isn't subtle. They rise by stepping on others, and they fall because of it. What I really appreciate about this parallel is that neither of them ever truly adapts. Unlike the strategists, they don't lean heavily into calculation. They rely on chaos, on fear, on physical intimidation, and that works until it doesn't. The games aren't won by the loudest or the strongest. They're won by whoever understands the system best. Deoksu and Namgyu understand how to dominate people. They never fully understand how to outplay the game itself, and that's why they end up as casualties. Perfect examples of what the games do to people who think power equals safety. Because in Squid Game, it doesn't matter how strong you look inside the arena. At the top, there's always someone stronger, and they're not even playing. If Deoksu and Namgyu represent brute force, Ali and Hyunju represent something completely different. They're the emotional core. In Season 1, we meet Ali Abdul, a migrant worker from Pakistan trying to survive in a country that already treats him like he doesn't belong. From the very beginning, there's this quiet isolation around him. He's physically present with the other players, but socially, he's on the outside. Hyunju carries the same sense of separation in Season 2 and 3. As a transgender woman, she faces backlash and judgment from people who don't even try to understand her. There's tension around her identity before the games even fully escalate. Like Ali, she exists slightly apart from the crowd, not because she chooses to, but because society pushes her there, and that's what makes their presence so powerful. They don't fully fit in, yet they're the ones who show the most humanity. In Red Light, Green Light, both of them play a role in saving Gi-hun. Ollie physically catches him when he's about to fall, and that moment immediately defines his character, strength paired with compassion. Hyunju, in her own way, also contributes to Gi-hun's survival early on. They're not just bystanders, they're protectors. And what's interesting is that neither of them uses their strength to intimidate. Ollie is physically one of the strongest characters in Season 1. Hyunju is also strong, capable, and protective. But instead of using that strength to dominate others, they use it to shield people, to help, to carry weight for their group, emotionally and physically. That kindness becomes their defining trait, and unfortunately, their downfall. They both die in the fourth game. Ollie's death is one of the most devastating betrayals in the series. Song-woo, the very person he trusts, manipulates him and effectively stabs him in the back metaphorically. It's not just a loss, it's a shattering of innocence. Hyunju's death mirrors that betrayal in a much more literal way. She is physically stabbed in the back by Myung-gi, and the symbolism there is heavy. In both seasons, the compassionate character is destroyed by someone operating in survival mode. What hurts the most is that neither Ollie nor Hyunju dies because they're weak. They die because they're good. They believe in loyalty. They believe in connection. They assume that trust means something, and in a game built on exploitation, that assumption becomes fatal. There's also something important about their motivations. Yes, they both need the money. Ollie wants to support his family. Hyunju wants to get surgeries for her body. But when you watch them interact with others, it's clear that winning isn't their only focus. They build relationships. They attach themselves to people. They care. And that's a key difference between them and the gray area strategists. For Songwoo and Myung-gi, survival overrides connection. For Ollie and Hyunju, connection never fully disappears, even when it should. And the games punish that. I think what makes this parallel so strong isn't just the betrayal, it's what they represent in their respective seasons. They remind us that not everyone in the games is corrupted by the environment. Some people hold on to their empathy until the very end, and ironically, that's what gets them killed. They don't adapt by hardening, they stay human. And in Squid Game, that's the most dangerous thing you can be. Now, this is the comparison I'm most mixed on, because on paper, it makes sense. But when you really sit with it, they're similar and completely different at the same time. In Season 1, Kang Se-byuk is undeniably the main female lead. She's quiet, guarded, and observant. From the beginning, she carries herself like someone who has already survived too much to trust easily. In Season 2 and 3, Jun-hee fills that central female role in the narrative. The camera lingers on her. Her decisions affect the people around her. Whether people like her more or less than Se-byuk is a separate conversation, but structurally, she occupies that same space in the story. And when you look at their core traits, there are similarities. They both present themselves as tough, protective, not quick to open up. Trust is earned, not given. Neither walks into the games looking for friendships. They're there for a reason, and that reason is deeply personal. For Se-byuk, it's her brother. Everything she does is anchored in the idea of getting him out, giving him a stable life, fixing what their family lost. For Jun-hee, it's her baby. Her motivation isn't abstract, it's immediate, maternal, survival for someone who can't survive alone. The family-first mindset is what drives both of them into the arena in the first place. And interestingly, in both cases, Gi-hun becomes the person they eventually soften toward. Se-byuk doesn't trust easily, but she slowly allows Gi-hun into her circle. She opens up about her brother. She lets him see vulnerability under the hardened exterior. Jun-hee follows a similar emotional trajectory. Despite everything happening around her, despite her complicated situation, she eventually leans on Gi-hun in moments that matter. It's subtle, but it's there. And then there's the way both their stories end. Neither of them loses because they're outplayed in a grand strategic sense. They're injured, unluckily. Se-byuk survives the chaos of the glass bridge, only to be fatally wounded because of shattered debris. It's not some dramatic showdown, it's collateral damage. And in that weakened state, she becomes vulnerable to Song-woo, who ultimately stabs her in the neck. Her death isn't about weakness, it's about circumstance. Jun-hee's trajectory mirrors that sense of inevitability. Her injury shifts everything. She's no longer operating at full strength, and when the final moments come, she pushes Myung-gi away, creating distance, making a choice that seals her fate. It's not identical to Se-byuk's ending, but it carries the same feeling of tragedy born from injury and timing rather than incompetence. Where this conversation gets tricky, and why I'm not fully convinced it's a perfect parallel, is that their emotional tones are very different. Se-byuk is stoic almost to the end. She internalizes her fear. She processes quietly. Even her vulnerability feels controlled. Jun-hee, on the other hand, is more outwardly emotional. Her arc is louder. Her decisions ripple more visibly through the narrative. The audience reacts to her in a completely different way because she expresses her conflict differently. So while they occupy the same structural role, the way they carry that role feels distinct. And maybe that's the point. Season 1 gave us a quiet kind of strength. Season 2 and 3 gave us a string that's more visibly torn apart by circumstance. The parallels exist, but they're not clean copies. They're shaped by completely different emotional environments. And honestly, that's probably why this comparison feels more debatable than the others. But even in their differences, you see the internal echo. A woman enters the game for family. She hardens herself to survive. She slowly opens up to Gi-hun. An injury changes everything, and in the end, she doesn't make it out. Different personalities, different dynamics, same tragic role in the story. And now we get to the most important parallel of all. Not between different characters, but between two versions of the same one. Song Gi-hun in Season 1 versus Gi-hun in Season 2 and 3. Because if every other comparison shows us echoes, this one shows us transformation. Season 1 Gi-hun is naive. Not stupid, not incapable, but emotionally driven. He reacts from the art before the head. He helps people even when it doesn't benefit him. He trusts too easily. He believes, deep down, that people are fundamentally good. That belief is what separates him from Song-woo. It's what makes him hesitate in moments where strategy would have been easier. It's why he survives with his humanity mostly intact, even when everything around him collapses. By the time we see him in Season 2 and 3, that version of Gi-hun is gone. He's hardened. There's intention between his actions now. He's not just playing to survive. He's playing with a purpose. He understands how the system works. He doesn't look at the games with the shock anymore. He looks at them with resentment. Season 1 Gi-hun was trying to get out. Season 2 Gi-hun is trying to tear it down. And that shift changes everything. The optimism is replaced with suspicion. The emotional impulsiveness is replaced with calculation. Even the way he carries himself feels different. Heavier. More aware. What makes this parallel so strong is that it mirrors what we saw with every other character. The strategist archetype evolves. The brute archetype evolves. The moral heart evolves. In Gi-hun, he evolves too. He's no longer just a guy caught in the system. He's someone who's seen what it does to people and refuses to look at it the same way again. Season 1 Gi-hun believed people could stay good inside the games. Season 2 Gi-hun knows how rare that really is. And that difference might be the cleanest example of how Squid Game doesn't just repeat characters, it reshapes them. And that's the full character breakdown of the character parallels across Squid Game. The thing I really love about these parallels is how intentional they feel. You can see the writers echoing traits, arcs, and outcomes without just copying characters. Each one tells its own story, yet together they paint a bigger picture about survival, morality, and human nature under extreme pressure. And what's wild is how these parallels also give us a lens to rewatch the seasons with fresh eyes. Suddenly, the choices, the betrayals, the alliances, they all make more sense, and you know just how much the games shape people differently based on who they already are. So what do you think? Which comparison surprised you the most? Or is there another parallel you spotted that I missed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to see what you think, because this is a conversation, not just a breakdown. If you enjoyed this analysis, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a character-focused video like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.